All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be doing a review of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion. Specifically, this review is going to focus on the Audible.com narration by Andy Serkis, the great actor, voice actor, the dude that played Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies and directed some of the Hobbit movies or portions of the Hobbit movies. Just an all-around accomplished guy. And I'm going to tell you why you absolutely need to listen to The Silmarillion as narrated by this talented dude, because it brought so much magic and wonder and enchantment into my life for the last month. I was listening to the Audible.com version of this for about an hour and a half every morning as I would take my walks through the neighborhood. And I'm telling you, as a youngster, when I first started to read the Silmarillion, I was lost. It was difficult, and I gave up. I loved The Hobbit, loved The Lord of the Rings. Silmarillion, I was just like, I don't get it. I feel like I'm reading the Bible. It's kind of the point of the book, though, really, and we'll get into that in a minute. As I got into my college years, I tried to read it again, and I'm just like, same thing, same reaction. I got through it, but boy, was it a chore. And I think I enjoyed some parts of it. And then I read it a third time, probably in my mid-30s or something, late 30s, whatever. I ain't going to tell you how old I am now. But let's just say my mid-30s, that was a good 75 to 80 years ago. You do the math. But anyway, read it again. Again, I got a little bit more out of it than when I was a teenager and a college student, but still, it's tough, guys. It's tough. This is not a traditionally told story. I will just say that right out of the gate, and I think if you're watching this review, you probably know what I'm talking about. This does read like the Bible. It is like the Bible of the Lord of the Rings. It is a very comprehensive history of Middle-earth, all the things that happened from the beginning of Middle-earth up until the Lord of the Rings starts. And it's like reading the history of our own world, but this is cooler, especially when read by Andy Serkis. Now, before I get to that, let's talk about, I've got a bunch of versions of this book, and some of them are kind of special to me. Now, this is probably one of my favorite versions. Not my favorite. This is just a really cool old time. I mean, I think this is one of the original printings that came out back in the 70s. Now, this version here is probably the newest printing I've got. It's got these wonderful end papers, green with the elvish scroll work stuff. It's got some maps in it. It's got a lot of different maps, a lot of different artwork. It's kind of a collector's edition. And then I have this sort of generic edition with a cover by Alan Lee. It's all right. It's all right. Now, my favorite edition is this little paperback, The Silmarillion. The reason I love this one so much is because my good friend and one-time fellow neighbor and Salt Lake City resident, my good friend Mike Dringenberg, did the illustration for it. And some of you might know Mike Dringenberg's name from he did a lot of the illustrations in the original Sandman graphic novels by Neil Gaiman. I mean, Mike Dringenberg was one of the original artists on that project. And he did this, and he is one of my good friends. He's moved away from Salt Lake about 10 years ago. I don't know where he went. So, I mean, a good friend who I've lost touch with. If you're out there, yo, what's up, Hey, what's up, Mike? Okay, so let's talk about The Silmarillion as narrated by Andy Serkis. I think I've already told you, it's just bloody brilliant. I mean, it doesn't get better. I mean, I went from someone who had read this 3 previous times, well, 2.5 previous times, really, to sort of feeling like I was doing homework assignments while reading it, to listening to it on Audible as I would walk, taking an hour and a half of it in per day, and my God, it was just pure magic. Everything about it. I mean, this is the definition of epic fantasy. Every set piece and every scene and every bit of action that you find in this book is on a grand epic scale that is, well, I don't know if it'll ever be, you can't compare it to anything else. Now, the issue that we have is when we're trying to read it with our own eyes, sitting in some people are probably love it that way. And I think that if I was to reread it, I would appreciate it more. But I'm probably just going to, if I ever go back into this, I'm just going to listen to the Andy Serkis narration again. Let me tell you why this is so good and why you should do this. If you have struggled with the Silmarillion in the past, and this video is specifically for those type of people. If you've struggled with it, please give it another chance. Listen to it in small doses at a time. It'll take you about a month if you listen to an hour at a time or something like that. And I will tell you, this story will absolutely come alive. You will appreciate The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit so much more, because I listened to every detail of the backstory that J.R.R. Tolkien was putting into this book, this is a history of Middle-earth. And it starts from the very creation of Middle-earth and get to the creation of the men and the elves and the trees, the talking trees, the orcs, the dwarves, the history of the dwarves, every type of elf, the history. I mean, he gives a history of everything. And he gives little, and here's the thing. It's kind of like you're getting the history of Middle-earth told to you by sort of like a bard or a storyteller who is sort of almost exaggerating the story a little bit to make it seem grander than it really maybe was. Kind of like maybe a bard would be telling the story of a history, and Tolkien comes right out and says it several times, like Wherein and Luthien. This is the way that we sing about these characters, and so when you're getting told the story of Wherein and Luthien, it's told very poetically, as if it's being sung, or if it's being a fairy tale told to little children, and so it's got like morality lessons in it, and it's got like everything's grander and bigger and bolder, and the adventures just seem so much more big, and the landscape seems so much more big and magical, and all of that stuff. It's kind of, at least that's what I got from it, folks. I might be way off my rocker, but when he tells these stories of how the trees were created, how the Silmarils were created, how Sauron became Sauron, and how Galadriel and all of these characters, Celeborn, and I hate to, because a thing about Andy Serkis reading this to you is he nails the pronunciation of all of the characters. I'm 100% certain he's nailing them. And I really probably shouldn't be saying them out loud because I'm sure I am them up royally. But just to hear Andy Serkis's reading of Tolkien's language, and this is an important part of this book, is just the prose and the language itself has such a grand, high, poetic feel to it that when you're reading it on the page, maybe you don't really appreciate as much as if someone's saying it out loud to you, especially a talented voice actor like Andy Serkis. Because the way he tells these tales, and they're tall tales, they are like very grand, fairy tale-esque, historical retellings of events that happened in the history of Middle-earth, and he tells them with the gravitas and the he just does it very well. Well, not very well. He does it spectacularly well. So well, I can't even describe how he does it. It's just dope. It's the best word for it. It's cool. And I mean, that's really all I've got to say about this. I was actually looking forward, and I don't look forward to exercising ever. As you can tell from my chubby face, I don't give two bleeps about exercise. And so it's really hard for me to pull myself out of bed every morning and walk around the neighborhood for an hour and a half. But I was actually looking forward to every single one of my walks because I was listening to this. And I went ahead and I bought The Hobbit, narrated by Andy Serkis. And I bought all the Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, all narrated by Andy Serkis. I'm going to listen to them every morning. I'm going to listen to them all one in a row. You know, I'm going to do The Hobbit next. Anyway, the book itself, I got to give it a 7.5. The Andy Serkis narration, on a scale of 10 out of 10, it's like a 12 out of 10. So overall, the book itself plus the Andy Serkis narration, a 7.5 and a 12 averages is about a 9.9. So I'm going to give this about a 9.9 out of 10. That's how awesome the Audible.com narration is by Andy Serkis. He makes this book magical.